Welcome to Let's Talk Education on CastleRockRadio.com. I'm Liz Fagan, Superintendent of the Douglas County School District here in Colorado, where we can't seem to find our way to spring. We are having one more snowy day, and but the good news is we supposedly are under a blizzard warning, I think, and it's not snowing, so life is pretty good. So we're here every Wednesday talking about all things education and usually about Douglas County School District. Today I have as always, right, super cool show on the PISA test. And I know you're all thinking, oh, a test? Really, we're going to talk about tests. But no, you really have to hear about this before you decide what you think about it. So, you know, for the last, 12 years, maybe a little longer, we have been under this whole standardized testing thing where education has really gotten obsessed with standardized measurement. And the reality of that is that there have been some unintended consequences. And I think sometimes people misunderstand that it's not that we fear accountability in education. We don't fear accountability in education. We just want to make sure that accountability in education is done correctly and that we're actually measuring the things that are the most important things our students need to know and be able to do. Because if you measure something that isn't the most important thing, then that becomes the default curriculum. And we've seen that happen over the last 10 or so years. And so one of our priorities in our district is a world-class education, and that's paired with a priority called system performance. That whole notion of system performance for us is that we do care about accountability. We absolutely are committed to showing our students, our teachers, our parents, everyone how we're doing, how we're progressing. But we want to make sure that we're measuring the most important things that our students are learning and doing. Things like how creative they are, their communication skills, their collaboration skills, critical thinking. Of course, there's some content in there also. But, really focusing on 21st century or what we call world-class outcomes for our students instead of focusing on memorization and regurgitation of the past. So part of figuring this all out and moving away from one test, one day, one each year, sort of being the decision maker for all things is going to a body of evidence about our students and figuring out how we can show over the course of a year using student work, assessments that teachers give that make perfect sense for the outcomes we're teaching, how our students are learning and growing. And that's what we're committed to in our school district. Part of that conversation, though, is if you're going to say you want to be world-class or you want world-class outcomes, then you kind of have to figure out how you're going to benchmark yourself against the rest of the world. And so Douglas County School District is part of a group, a professional learning community of superintendents called EdLeader 21. It's Ken Kay is I'm not sure what his exact title is. I think it's like president of EdLeader 21, something like that, executive director. And that group of superintendents is really working hard to get the future of education built and do it correctly and support one another in that process. And part of that work is on assessment, is on what Tony Wagner calls assessment or accountability 2.0, moving away from accountability 1.0, which has been our last 10 years, into accountability 2.0. And what that looks like is completely different than what we envision when we say test. Everybody kind of grimaces, but this is about authentic measurement and performance measurement of really important things. So today I have with me Dan McMenemy, who is my assistant superintendent for secondary education. And I also have principal of Rock Canyon High School, the great Andy Abner, who gets wonderful cheers wherever he goes from his students and staff. I was just at an awards ceremony with Andy last week, and they just introduce him, and there's a cheer that comes over the audience. It's great. Yeah, that's some high praise there, Andy.
Thank you to my biggest fans out there, and those that are listening today.
Yeah, well, and it's a known fact here in Douglas County, but Dan McMenemy, who is my assistant superintendent secondary, actually opened Rock Canyon. He was the original sort of founding principal, opened that building and started the great school that it is today, now under Andy's leadership. So great combination of folks here today. So the reason I have Dan and Andy here is because when you say world class, a lot of people say, yeah, how do you know? How do you know that kids at Rock Canyon can compete with kids from all around the world? And Andy and Corey Wise, who's principal of Legend High School, couldn't be here today. They took on a pilot. They are the only two principals in Colorado who participated in the PISA for Schools pilot, which literally benchmarks Rock Canyon and Legend High School kids against the world.
It does.
And so I wanted to have Andy here today to talk about that experience with actually doing that in his school. And, whenever you participate in a pilot, it's a learning experience. It's a learning experience for us. It's a learning experience for PISA, because this was their first entree into actually having an exam for all high school students. That normally PISA is done this is a quiz question, Dan. How many years do they give PISA internationally?
I believe it's every 3 years.
I think it might be every 3 years. They did it in 2011. Right. 3 years, are we right, Andy?
Yeah, 2009.
I'm awesome at Trivial Pursuit.
I got the right people here. So every 3 years they give PISA, but they don't give it to every high school in America. They have this sort of sampling process. And you may get chosen, you may not. And then they use that information in the past basically to do these reports about how every country is doing in the world. Now, that is not incredibly useful information to know how. I mean, it's nice to know, but it's not incredibly useful for a principal to see how the United States of America is doing. You really need to know, how does Rock Canyon do? So you guys took on the opportunity, volunteered for the opportunity to add PISA for Schools, which is a brand new test, new last year, at Rock Canyon. Have your students take that. So first of all, do you want to talk to us a little bit about what that looked like to work with PISA and how that test is administered? It's a little different than what people would think. So anything you want to share about that?
Sure. A few different things. First of all, one of the reasons that we're so excited to take a look at the PISA exam, and why I would really like to have all of our 15-year-old students take the test and actually have them have a broad base of evidence on how they're doing, is because they really seek to look and see if the students can analyze, reason, communicate, to see if they have the knowledge and the skills that are necessary in order to be successful in the 21st century. I think that's something that some of our standardized tests that we give to students right now, that our school's reputation is based on, I think that's something that's in large part is lacking. And so I think it's moving in the right direction. So that's the first reason why I'm excited about PISA. The second reason would be because it does give us an opportunity not only to compare ourselves internationally, but also within the United States. Right now, we don't have a very clear measure that would compare Rock Canyon High School to a school even in Nebraska, one of our neighbors. So,
let alone Singapore.
Exactly, let alone Singapore. So it would be good to also find out who's doing great things within the United States, because then we have opportunities to learn from each other. And I think one of the biggest benefits that the PISA could possibly bring to the American education system is a greater sense of collaboration. I think right now there's a lot of great school districts certainly within Colorado, the United States. And I think one of the things that is lacking is these school districts do not do a good job of working together and explaining what's going well and what they're doing that's so awesome. And I think when you have a test like the PISA, it gives those schools an opportunity to say, hey, what are they doing over here? Why are their students doing so well with this? And it allows people to go and to learn from each other and to get better. And as a matter of fact, when you look at the PISA scores internationally, that's one of the things that is happening when you look at the scores in Shanghai, and when you look at the scores in Finland and some of the other areas. That's what's happening, is there's a greater sense of collaboration with the teachers, and I think that encourages everybody to do a better job, which benefits kids all over.
I completely agree. And what a great segue you just gave me, because we have on the phone Terry, I believe. Terry, are you there?
I am.
All right. Well, welcome to the show, Terry. And I don't want to mispronounce your last name, but Breeden, is that right?
That's it.
All right, Terry Breeden. Terry Breeden, and what is your official title? You're in Fairfax County, Virginia.
Yes, and I am the Assistant Superintendent of Professional Learning and Accountability.
Oh, so you get PD and assessment.
Yes, and it's a great combination, especially as we look at the PISA.
That's really, that's a big job, though, because you guys, Fairfax is a very large school district, so just so people, we always talk about Douglas County on this show because we love it. But so give us a little bit of overview, just so listeners who are thinking, oh, Fairfax is that big, small, diverse, urban. What is that like?
Well, we are up here near the capital, Washington, D.C., but we are in Virginia. We have 181,000 students and about 200 schools. We are a high-performing district, even though we do have around 28,000 students that qualify for free or reduced lunch. So even though we are thought of as high-performing, we probably have more students living in poverty than most districts are that large, to have 28,000 students.
Yeah, definitely.
Just in that area. We also have great diversity here. It's just amazing. Our schools, I don't even think we have a majority population of any particular type because we are so diverse. Yes. We have a lot of challenges, and we had 10 schools participate in the PISA pilot, which I've loved your comments about benchmarking, and that's one exciting thing about working with Ed Leader 21 is that we will be able to work together as divisions.
Well, so your comment, that's why I wanted to bring you into the conversation, because in addition to the international benchmarking, which I found the reports that came from PISA for Rock Canyon High School and Legend High School very fascinating. Just an amazing amount of data. You guys had 10 of your how many high schools participate?
We have about 16, 17 high schools.
Okay, and so you had 10 participate. Recently, Andy actually came out to Fairfax, and there was...
I thought I remembered him.
Yeah, he was there. And
Hi, Terry.
Anybody cheer for him out there?
He's a local hero. Oh, yeah, everybody. Good, Andy. Good job. So he came out to Fairfax, and his comment just then was, one of the things he's most hopeful about with the PISA for schools is that it could actually encourage districts across the country or even high school principals across the country to collaborate with one another. Are you finding that to be, do you agree with that?
I absolutely do. No Child Left Behind has really taken our focus away from benchmarking state to state because, each state has its own type of assessment of students. So I think that this is a very rich report, and we can look at things like the discipline climate of our classrooms, the teacher-student relationship, the levels of reading, the levels of math, the level of science. And I also think that it really gives our teachers a vision for what 21st century assessment should look like.
Yeah, I agree. I think it really helps because we have such solid paradigms and mental models around testing because we all went through that 20th century education system, took our ACTs and our SATs and our PSATs, and I was from Iowa, so I got all the Iowa tests every year. Yeah. and so we have that really strong paradigm about that. But Andy's point about we know today that what Nike wants and what Google wants and what Tony Wagner says students need, what Young Zhao says they need, aren't really measured on standardized assessments as we've known them. But definitely PISA is a giant step forward in that. Did your principals agree with that?
They absolutely did. They have gone on and on about the rich report and the information that they've had. And one of our advocacies is if you can get this much high-quality information by sampling with your student population and not testing every year, every child, and every subject, I really think that's a huge advance and will reduce the stress on our students and our teachers, and they'll really have time to learn from the assessments and change their practices based on the results the students have.
That is a really great point. We have to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about exactly what you just alluded to, the sampling, the approach that PISA uses that's far different than the Iowa Test of Basic Skills, where every kid takes that test for a couple days and all those things. You've been listening to Let's Talk Education on CastleRockRadio.com, and we'll be right back.
Talk, 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 comes a signal from the forest. Talk, 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 comes an echo like a chorus. Talk, 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 breaking through the morning silence. Talk, 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 driving deep into our conscience. Save the forest. Join the chorus.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Education on CastleRockRadio.com. I'm Liz Fagan, Superintendent of the Douglas County School District here in Colorado. And you were just listening to some of our amazing students in the Douglas County School District. These were Crest Hill Middle School students singing at Elitch Gardens Music Festival. And their director or teacher is Vanessa Ryder. And so they have submitted, we have asked our different music programs throughout the district to submit pieces that they would like to have on the show. And so Vanessa submitted this, and we are thrilled to have the opportunity to showcase her students at Crest Hill Middle School. So well done. Back to our conversation on PISA. So we have with us again Dan McMenemy, Assistant Superintendent, Douglas County. We have Andy Abner, Principal of Rock Canyon High School, one of only 2 high school principals in the entire state of Colorado who participated in the PISA for Schools pilot. The inaugural year was last year, and then Andy has recently been able to go to Fairfax to talk with other principals who also participated, as there were 10 high schools in Fairfax in Fairfax County, Virginia, that also participated. And so we have with us Terry Breeden, who is she's the assistant superintendent. That's what she said, was an assistant superintendent.
Right.
Okay.
Professional development and assessment.
And professional development and assessment. I knew that part. But sometimes districts use funny titles. So I was like, uh-oh, is she like the officer of assessment? But no, assistant superintendent, I got that. So we were talking about many parts of this, but before the break, Terry mentioned an interesting piece of PISA that surprised me, frankly, is that they do this sampling of students, that they really tightly control the sample so that they really can do student-to-student comparisons across all of these countries, continents, you name it. And so I was going to have Andy just spend a second, and Terry, feel free to chime in here. Talk us through the process that PISA went with you to actually create that sample of students and have them, and what the testing period looks like. I mean, is it 2 days and bring your number 2 pencils? I mean, what's it like? And then there were challenges in the inaugural year with the timing of the testing. I want to talk a little bit about that. So
Sure. So I think the first thing that PISA does is they, and I know that they're opening this bid back up, but one thing they do is they seek to go with a testing company, and I think they use McGraw-Hill. And so one of the components that they come back to us with is we want you to give us the name of all of your 15-year-old students plus or minus 2 months. So we'll have some 14-year-olds in there, and we'll have some 16-year-olds in there. We send that list of students back to them, and then they randomly selected, I believe, 150 students for us to take the test. Terry, is that similar process to you?
That's their practice, and we needed at least 50 at every school to volunteer.
Mm-hmm. Correct. And so the timing was it was challenging with it being at the end of the school year, and I know that's what a lot of principals have noticed and certainly we're talking about. But I think that PISA, that's good feedback for them. They certainly are seeking to rectify that, and they did by opening up some fall testing dates as well. So you select those students, and then what we did was we were able just to test all of those students at the same time, same location, 3.5 hours of testing. One of our assistant principals, Nick Latch, who oversaw the process, said that it was a relatively simple process and relatively easy. And I look at that as an opportunity to get some really rich data, as you said before, with less of the testing and disruption to the classroom or instructional environment.
Yeah. So did you have any, Andy or Terry, did you the one have talk to any students afterwards and ask them what they thought? I was just curious what the student reaction was.
Yeah, I think one of the ways you can tell that there's a little bit of a deeper thinking question going on is because a lot of times they walk away and they said, I think I did okay. I wasn't quite sure what this problem was asking for, and so it made them think about things a little bit differently. And I know as we've looked at some of the test questions, and I know certainly as Alejandro from OECD presented some things out in Fairfax, that the students are given more challenging answers or asked to work through problems which would then lead them to a multitude of solutions that could actually be considered correct. Is that your understanding as well, Terry, on that piece?
Yes, and the other thing I wanted just to add to that is that the only way that a student who was willing to take the test would be disqualified would be if they were unable to take a paper and pencil test. So our special ed students were also in the random sample. Mm-hmm. Our speakers of different languages was also included. And I thought that was really nice that they did that they really tried to look at who had a birthday within a certain time period, and those were the students that were asked to take the exam. We did talk to a couple students at Woodson High School just right before our meeting down in D.C. the other day, and this just shows you the stress that we're putting on our students with so many testings. They go, which test was this?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they take so many, but they did remember, and to me, taking a test of this length was not that, weighty on the schools, even though it was at the worst possible time. Possible, and they know that, but I think there was just a lot of things to get in place. So that was. Oh, also, the students can get partial credit because they are graded by hand, and so the questions can be more in depth. The responses can be evaluated more holistically, which is a really nice thing when you're trying to get students to problem solve and think deeply.
So that's interesting. So they actually grade all these exams by hand. They're not Scantrons.
Right. Because they're open-ended. I know there's one question that we've looked at that's in the sample, and then they give us the scoring guide. And, you know, if a child forgets a label, they don't miss the whole question. It's that type of approach. You know, we want to look for their understanding of the process. You know, if they forget to put that it's, inches or feet, that type of thing, that's not as much of concern as it is that they have the answer correctly and they're thinking about this in the correct way.
Huh, that's really interesting. Is this we haven't taken the CWRA at Rock Canyon, have we?
We have not.
No. Have you guys taken the CWRA at all, Terry?
I do not believe so.
Okay, I was just curious. I know that Jim Merrill in Virginia Beach and some of the other districts in Ed Leader 21 have used the CWRA, and I was curious if I've heard that these two assessments are somewhat similar in that the questions are more constructed response, less of the multiple choice variety, but I wasn't sure about that. So you had 10 schools, we had 2, probably about proportionately the same given your relative size to ours. So Andy, first, what's your plan for going forward with the PISA, which, by the way, stands for Program for International Student Assessment, if people are curious. And PISA is done by a group out of France, the OECD, and what that stands for, we'll have to get back to when we find it on the paper here. But anyway, so what is your plans for going forward?
My plans moving forward was, at Rock Canyon we were able to assess about 37 students in the spring, and then we came back and we assessed another 30 students in the fall. And so my goal would be to actually get a full sample of either 150 students or more of our 15-year-olds, because I think that's going to give us the most accurate data of how our students are performing. After doing that, certainly I think one thing we'd want to do is take a look at how we compared. No matter what you do, no matter what you say, that's the one thing you always look at right away. Like, how did we compare? How did we do? It's our competitive nature.
It's part of Rock Canyon, that competitive spirit.
It's part of our nature, for sure. Definitely part of our spirit. So we're going to look at that, but then I think we look to grow from it. So we take a look and we see which areas did our students perform well on, which areas did they struggle. We look to maybe make some improvements around those areas they struggle. We also look at what our colleagues did, and did maybe students exhibit a strength at Legend High School that wasn't exhibited at Rock Canyon, so we can talk about why they think that strength might have been exhibited. So I think we have a lot to learn, and it's another measurement that we can use to help our school grow, to help our school get better. One piece of information that's on here that Terry alluded to is there's some other pieces around students' perception when it comes to their relationships with teachers, their motivation to do well in a certain class, their confidence level of how well they do within a subject like mathematics, for example. And it's amazing that students' perceptions are so closely tied to their success. And I think that's one area where a school can take that data and look at what they're doing within the building to build efficacy around their students and their abilities, and also to work with their staff and professional development about the relationships that they're forming. I think that's an area immediately that we can take this data back. We have some celebrations in there, and we also have some areas that we can look at and say, how can we get better at this? So that's the immediate plan.
So are you planning to have this as part of Rock Canyon's, in a minute I'm going to ask Dan about the whole notion of a balanced assessment system and what it looks like in a high school and how does PISA fit or not. But as you move forward, are you and your staff interested in continuing with PISA for schools? We
are interested. I think there's some cost pieces to it, and there's some other details that probably need to be worked out. But I think it's information, and it's another point of information that we can turn to and that we can take a look at and that we can use. I'll be remiss if I didn't ask this. Everybody's out there wondering. So from your perspective, because it's data, how do you think you did? I think we did great. As a matter of fact, when you look at the data and when I was able to talk to some of the schools. I actually went and visited Terry. I was able to visit Langley High School there. I don't know if you knew that, but they gave myself and one of my assistant principals, they gave us a ride back to the airport, so we saved some money with not taking a taxi. And they said, let us take you back to the airport. They were very hospitable, very welcoming, and they said, why don't we go by our high school? We'd love to show it to you. So we went by Langley High School. We saw the upcoming renovations. We talked to some of their students, to some of their teachers, and it was a really neat experience. So right there, we're already opening that door for collaboration. Wow. But yeah, I'm not sure I went back to your original question. I know you're avoiding that question, aren't you, Andy? No, I was just curious, and I would like to ask Terry the same question, but I just wanted to know,
if a parent said to you, so Andy, how did we do on the PISA for schools? I mean, obviously with this assessment, there's so much data that comes back to you. My answer would be, well, that depends on what you want to talk about. But what's your overall sense? I mean, obviously every school in America is on this path of continuous improvement and preparing students for their futures and trying to sort of scale up on these 21st century skills that we haven't necessarily focused on in the past. All of that's in play here. But what was your perspective? Is there something in there that you thought you did outstanding? Is there something in there you thought, wow, we're going to work on that?
I think we did really good. I think this gives us a baseline for a first try. When you compare us to the other, I think there was 110 schools across the United States that took the test. When you compare us to those schools, we come out very consistent with the top 10% in that group.
Oh wow, great!
And we were very similar. The thing that was amazing is I was sitting with the assessment coordinator from Langley High School, and was sitting with her. Rock Canyon and Langley High School, very similar.
Demographics.
Very similar demographics, very similar expectations, very similar outcomes with students there. And I think after speaking with her, that was one of the reasons it was so neat to go to the school and see it in action. And it just confirms that, we're right there with the best schools. I think Langley is certainly probably one of the top schools in Fairfax. And Terry can probably speak to that more directly. But I think that we did very well within the United States. I think there's some lessons to be learned about what's happening internationally. I think when you look at how we did, I think we came out right in the middle of where the Shanghai schools are. So right around their 50% mark. So 50% of the schools in Shanghai perform the same or above. It would be basically where we were ranked.
We have to take another break. When we come back, I'd like to give Terry a chance to talk a little bit about how Fairfax did in her view and what their plans are for the future. And then I'm going to ask Dan some specific questions about how Legend and Rock Canyon did in his view and how the PISA for Schools fits into a balanced assessment system. You've been listening to Let's Talk Education on CastleRockRadio.com, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Let's Talk Education on CastleRockRadio.com. I'm Liz Fagan, Superintendent of the Douglas County School District here in Colorado. And today we're talking about the PISA exam for high schools. It is the Program for International Student Assessment done by the OECD, and that is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And Colorado had only 2 high schools in the entire state, 2 principals bold enough to volunteer to be part of the PISA for Schools pilot. And I have one of them with me here today, Andy Abner, principal of Rock Canyon High School. And then Fairfax was bold, and they had 10 high schools in their district participate in the PISA for Schools pilot. And I have with me the Assistant Superintendent for Professional Development and Assessment, Terry Breeden. So I also have Dan McMinney with me, and I promise I am going to talk to Dan.
I'm good.
Dan's happy over there not being talked to. But so I wanted to give Terry a chance to tell us about how she thought the schools in Fairfax did on their first round of testing, and also if they plan to continue forward with PISA for Schools.
Well, I think we did very well. With 10 high schools, we do have a range of scores.
Sure.
But I think in all of them, we were satisfied because we were competitive with the U.S. mean, which that's good to know. We do have some areas of strength. I think math overall is our strength, and that tells us that our curriculum's directed in the right direction, I think. But overall, we did very well. For example, one of the schools that took the PISA was Thomas Jefferson, which is a magnet school and usually rated number 1 or number 2 in the United States. And let's just say they gave Shanghai quite a run for their money.
Oh, good. We want that.
Yes. Langley, where you had a chance to visit, I noticed that people from OECD called it the CIA school, so that may give your listeners a little bit of a context. It is located out where the CIA is in the D.C., Virginia area. Some of the things that we're doing, it's just such exciting work. I don't know if an assessment is supposed to create such passion, but these are some things that we're doing that we're learning so much from. We have a large leadership team because we have, 181,000 students. We have about 20 people on that committee. And so we're going through the book and making that part of our professional development at each of our meetings. We're calling it A Piece of PISA. or a slice of pizza, and we just take a little bit of the information we got and discuss it and talk about what would be next steps to either try to improve our performance or to look at areas that we are doing well in, whichever the case may be. We're also bringing Pasi Sahlberg from Finland to our kickoff for the next school year, because Finland always does very well on this test and try to learn and benchmark from the lessons that he is going to give our entire leadership team in the district. One of my very favorite stories, and I'm sure your principals there have a favorite part, was Chantilly High School, which is located a little bit closer to Dulles Airport, if any of your listeners have ever flown into that area. The principal said that she was a little disappointed in the reading scores because the math and science were so high. She thought she would be that high in reading, and so she tells me that she was pretty stumped at what the problem was until they dug into the information they got, and they realized that anymore we're not letting children really read for recreation. They're just so prone to read to get the homework done. It's a very high-achieving school, a lot of AP-type testing out there, and she said it really made the language arts faculty to stop a minute, and they want children to love reading, and reading for recreation is an important value that community holds. So that was something that they learned that they've shared with our other principals, and it's, just given us some things we haven't ever thought about before.
Yeah, definitely. So a piece of pizza. I love that.
Yes, we do have a website that we want to share with other districts that participate in the pilot. Just some of our protocols that we're using to digest this, some of our PowerPoints we've used with our school board and with our community, because we want to learn from you, and we want you to be able to not have to recreate things if anything we have is of use to you.
Oh, that's great. Do you want to go ahead and give us that website? Unless it's kind of funny.
Yes. If you just go to FCPS, which stands for Fairfax County Public Schools.edu, and then just in our search, put in PISA, it should come up for you. If not, there's an email address there. You can just write to us, and we'll make sure you have the exact link.
Great. So I assume since you're investing so heavily in the professional development around this, that you guys are going to continue to test your students on the PISA for Schools exam.
Well, the wonderful thing about the work and the collaboration between an organization called America Achieve and the OECD and the districts that participated in Ed Leader 21 is that they have secured funding so that other schools that want to volunteer can do so next year.
Oh.
And so you can go to their website and look at the conditions that are there, and I'm not sure what all the process is because that is being run by America Achieves. But, we're really wanting, we like the fact that people have stepped up and are leaders in this, and so we're having ongoing conversations with our schools. What's really funny is the 10 other, or however you count, we have secondary schools and high schools and some alternative schools, but the other people that work with the high schools are all saying, maybe we should have tried to get in the pilot too. So I do believe that they are learning even from the people that were early adopters of this pilot.
That's great. We always talk about here in Douglas County that there are pioneers, those folks that are just more naturally comfortable going first.
Right.
I always jokingly say the people that are willing to jump in the swimming pool and then let everybody know if the water's cold. And
right.
And so to let those folks go first, but what a great reward for them to be part of that early work. So Dan, in Douglas County, we're always very careful to not let anything we don't want any tails wagging the dog. So we're very careful about making sure that our schools are focused on the right work, and that these are all on the menu of options to them in actually meeting the expectations that the district sets. But we work really hard to set very high expectations, give lots of professional discretion and opportunity for schools to be unique because our communities are unique. Douglas County is 900 square miles, and so it's quite a large county and has a lot of different kind of learning communities in it. So first of all, how did you think that Legend and Rock Canyon did? And then following up on that is, how does this fit into the balanced assessment system for our high schools? Are there other Douglas County high schools that are now interested, or are we just kind of sticking with Rock Canyon and Legend?
Well, first of all, I think it took a lot of courage as a principal to step out on that plank and measure yourself against the world.
The world,
I
right?
mean, in Douglas County, we pride ourselves as having some pretty significant programming and some excellent expectations and opportunities for students. And, our principals reflect that, and they take great pride in building great buildings. I think, sometimes when you have these opportunities, sometimes you're not quite sure what you're going to get back, and you don't want to tarnish that image that you've worked so hard to put together. So I applaud Corey and Andy for stepping out there and saying, you know what? And you heard Andy talk about the risk-reward piece there.
Absolutely.
Here's the risk, but here's the reward, and he felt like the reward was greater for him, and I applaud him for that, and I know Corey was in the same boat. We do have 2 other schools that are interested. Highlands Ranch and Ponderosa have expressed an interest in this, and I have no doubt that once this information gets out and they see, what the test was about, what kind of benefit they're going to get from it, what else can we take off the plate, I think is a big conversation to have.
It definitely is.
And how could you strategically employ this test to get information that's going to drive instruction and drive practices in your building at the level that Andy talked about. And, Andy's been thinking about this for a few months, I'm sure. But, I think the impact that I heard when he was talking about this was really about influencing instruction, and I think it's very significant. One of the things I'm most proud about, the way our kids performed, the way the test was described, they hadn't had a lot of practice with that.
That is very true.
I think that there are school districts and schools that focus so much on a test, the drill and kill, that's all the kid gets. The thing that sounded intriguing about this was they were really measuring deeper thinking and problem solving and open-ended questioning and really looking at evidence of kids' critical thinking skills, which are, in my mind, what is most important for a student when they leave our system, is can you think on your feet? Can you make real-time adjustments? Can you take all the data that you're getting fed towards you and make a reasonable decision? And I think that's really important. And, that's what I'm most proud about with these results is having never had the opportunity to take this type of test before, our kids performed pretty darn well when you stack up against the United States and you really look at that. So that's got to be really exciting for a principal. I think that reflects on the work that we've been doing for several years in Douglas County around critical thinking and with our strategic plan as you came on board as a superintendent. I think we've refocused and refined that and been more specific in classrooms. But, the question about a balanced assessment system is really an interesting one because I think that the person that's most capable of making that decision around what their community needs is a building principal working with his staff. And, I think there are some pieces that from a district perspective you want to make sure people include. But at the end of the day, the person that's most responsible for what happens in that building is the building principal. And I joke about them being the master and commander of their building. And I think that that's an important thing that we don't ever want to lose in Douglas County. That's the joy of being a principal. It's not a joy to be a principal when somebody from the district office says, thou shalt do X, Y, and Z, and your job is to manage those things.
Well, and you don't get the most talented principals that way, I don't think. I think people like Andy want the flexibility to lead and to have a lot of options ahead in front of him that all contribute to the opportunities to meet expectations that are high. We have to take a break, so I'm going to pause you right there. And when we come back, we're going to tie this all up with the PISA for Schools assessments that Douglas County, Fairfax County piloted this year. And you're listening to Let's Talk Education, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Let's Talk Education on CastleRockRadio.com. I'm Liz Fagan, Superintendent of the Douglas County School District here in Colorado. And today I have with me Assistant Superintendent Dan McMenemy. I have Principal of Rock Canyon High School, Andy Abner. And I also have Terry Breeden from Fairfax County Public Schools in Virginia. She's the assistant superintendent there for professional development and assessment, which I think is a unique combination, Dan. But you think it makes perfect sense to you.
I thought it was really cool because you know what you need to teach people to do based on assessments.
Really
I think that's really innovative.
Yeah,
it is a great combination.
I hope you have a lot of help. I'll say that much.
Yeah.
He hopes that you have a lot of help because that's a big job with 181,000 students.
I think that's another reason I like the PISA so well is because I do think districts spend a lot of time managing all the individual assessments for 180,000 students, and they each take 4 or 5 state assessments a year, let alone, the numbers that take SAT, ACT, IB, AP. So this is really a way to be very efficient as a district and still have the kind of information and feedback you need on student progress.
So Terry, what was the reaction of your high schools against? I loved your comment that the one school really gave Shanghai a run for their money, which was great. What were the reactions of other schools against their international data? I heard Andy say, we're right in the middle of the pack in Shanghai, and so we're sort of paying attention to that because, well, Rock Canyon's pretty competitive. I think it was built that way, and so they definitely want to be performing in the top everywhere. So, just curious, what were your school's perspectives and reactions?
I think overall we're very, very pleased with the way our students did. But I have to tell you what happened when we got the 10 principals and they brought a few teachers with them to look at the results and begin to understand what all they had in their resource book. We were a little bit nervous. We didn't want anyone to feel like it was a competitive environment, and so we put all the scores on different charts, but we used numbers rather than the school name.
Oh, interesting.
And in about I'd say 3 minutes or less, the high school principals were kind of shouting across the room, "Hey, what's your number? What's your number?" And they are just over it because we do have a collaborative culture. We spend a lot of time trying to develop professional learning community culture within our schools, and it really did our hearts a lot of joy that we were embedding that culture because we didn't want anyone to share anything they weren't ready to share or to talk about. And one of the very interesting things we found out about that, all of our PISA reports are on the public webpage, and the OECD let us know that one of the steps that they see in countries that improve student achievement is they do publicly release their results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I thought, okay, who knew, that we are doing something that is one of the best practices in countries that are our competition in the world market.
Well, Dan, are you participating in the or maybe Andy is? We have actually local reporters who are interested in this work and this study and this test and everything, and they're going to write about it.
Well, I think that's a great point, and that Terry just made. That goes all the way back to student work. When a student is going to publish their work, they have more investment in it. So I think that, definitely we're going to be working with reporters and with Cinnamon around releasing this information, working with the principals around points of pride and opportunities for improvement. And, I think Andy and Corey are both well grounded in what this is going to afford them in the grand scheme of things. I mean, they have so many other pieces of evidence about success at their schools. This is another great piece for them, both.
Does this assessment allow you to drill down to the level of a classroom or a teacher? It doesn't, does it?
It doesn't. And
it's a school-wide.
It's based on the group of students that took the test. We don't get individual student results, although I'm not sure that in the future that wouldn't be available. It just isn't with the pilot.
Okay.
And so my impression, and Terry, maybe you remember this as well, it sounds like we may get even further information if we move beyond the pilot in future years.
Yes, I think they're really looking at that. One thing that the OECD told us about is the obsession with subgroup data, especially that's one thing my board really wanted to know more about, is really an America thinking. Oh. And that what they did was really look and let us know how our schools stood on what they called a cultural and socioeconomic scale that is very rigorous, it's been validated many times. And that, one of the things they look at when they look at your school is how did you do based on schools at your same SES and cultural level. And that's been very interesting to say, okay, let's not talk about the traditional subgroups that we're used to looking at, but let's look at the poverty or the lack of poverty that these schools are impacted by, rather than all the disaggregation sometimes that sometimes is divisive in a community, and it also doesn't get to the root problem that there's a child there that's underachieving. So we're very excited about that thinking.
Yeah, that is exciting thinking. We have had about 10 or so years of the other thinking, and maybe this is a stronger approach that doesn't pit people against each other, but instead, is more inspirational because it says, compared to other schools like you, Andy, this is how your students performed, which is interesting because I think that there are a lot of questions about that where other communities might say, well, okay, but what about these schools that are not performing as well, and what does that mean for them? So Dan, I just was curious. I paused you during your comments, but as you're working with Douglas County's high school principals, we have 9 comprehensive high schools, and we have several alternative programs. As you're working with them, have Andy and Corey talked with the group about the PISA for schools? And by the way, in case people don't know this, PISA has been around much longer than this, but they just did this international comparison of countries, and they would release a report every 3 years, and you can download it online. In fact, I think they get free as time goes on, but some of them cost money. But there's just a wealth of information in those, and then people wanted this PISA for schools option because it is a quality exam and a constructed response instead of multiple choice. And so people said, look, you more closely measure the things we care about. We need something that is school-based or school level. And so PISA put together this pilot and this test. But has Andy and Corey presented? Have other principals talked? I mean, you said 2 were interested. Where does that come from, and what's that look like going forward?
Well, I think the 2 that are interested came from direct discussions with Andy and Corey about what was your experience with this and what does it look like and how's it going to benefit your school. Quite honestly, I don't spend a lot of time, as much time as I'd like to, with the high school principals. We have Steve Johnson that would do that. Right. But, I'm very interested in pursuing this. It sounds like another tool on the tool belt for our principals to use. We've been talking about EPAS, the Explore Plan, and ACT test. That could be more of the answer towards specific student academic achievement. Maybe this is the piece that talks about overall school performance that wouldn't be as invasive as, say, the TCAP testing. 4 or 5 specific tests over a series of days, and everybody in the world does that kind of testing as well. So. But I think Andy and Corey are probably the best champions of this test, and their lessons learned and how it's going to help other schools. Our high school principals are very competitive, as I'm sure they are.
I heard that about Fairfax.
I'm sure they all showed up with their shirts and stuff with logos on it and all that. And I think it's a very healthy competition, though, and I think that drives. The quality of schools we have is because of that. So I'm sure Andy and Corey will be sharing more as they move further into this process with our principals.
One thing that came out actually when I was in Fairfax and when we were talking to other principals was also the need to bring in our middle school leaders on this conversation, because when you look at the age of the students being 15 years old plus or minus 2 months, there's a lot of students that are pretty fresh out of our middle school years that are taking this test and doing some of these pieces. So I think that the learning here stretches beyond just what's happening at the high school level and really works with our middle school level leaders as well. And so one conversation I plan on having as we look to continue, if we do continue this path, would be to have conversations with Mike Lloyds at Rocky Heights Middle School, just to share with him what types of things are being tested, just to bring him in on the loop of all the data and how the students are doing, because I think it's a testament to how well Rocky Heights Middle School is doing and how well they're preparing students as well. And so one thing I heard consistently around the room in Fairfax from all the principals that participated there was just how appreciative they are of their middle school leaders, elementary school leaders, and those schools that feed into them for all of their hard work and everything they've done.
I love that comment, Andy. I think we should perhaps provide the opportunity for middle schools and elementary schools and feeders to take a look at the results and see how their students fared all of those years later, because it definitely is a culmination of everybody's collective work. Well, thank you so much, Terry, for participating in our show today. We have really appreciated having the Fairfax perspective and your knowledge of PISA. So anyway, thank you very much for participating. And thanks to Andy and Dan for being part of the show also. And sorry Corey couldn't be here. We'll have to catch up with him some other time. You've been listening to Let's Talk Education on CastleRockRadio.com. Hope you can listen in next Wednesday at 3 p.m.